So I wanted to start in that way because really the season of creation is about love. And Thierry de Chardin, he has a wonderful reflection that I keep sitting with. And it is that love is really the foundational physical principle of everything that exists. And I think St. Francis of Assisi and also St. Clare knew that and experienced that in their lives. And we often don't talk of St. Clare, but St. Clare, even in her rule, was very enmeshed in what it meant to live in a holy way in creation. In her rule, there's one place where she said, you know, that your enclosure in any of the new monasteries should only be as large as they needed to be so that the sisters could be protected and grow enough food. But within that, they were only to use the part of the enclosure to grow food that they needed. The rest was to remain wild. So that whole idea of the wild, of diversity, of God's creation in the many forms. And then we have Francis, who spent about half of his life in caves in the Umbrian countryside. And an important thing, he called the whole world his cathedral, the whole world his church, all celebrated the wonder of God. And it reminds me of a friend of mine from San Ildefonso Pueblo, who we worked together in a coalition addressing some of the pollution from Los Alamos National Lab there, pollution of our water into the Rio Grande. And she said once, you know, we see that all of this creation is our church. So why are people devastating, destroying our church, which is sacred? And so for me, that speaks back to St. Francis of Assisi, that all is cathedral, all is the church. So in this season of creation and this day of St. Francis, and I'm just honored as a Franciscan to be among Dominicans, so thank you for that invitation. But there are many stories, many stories about Francis. But there's one that I've been reflecting on for quite a few weeks now, and it's of Francis as he walked through the Spoleto Valley. And he was with his brothers, and he came across a flock of birds. And in this flock of birds, there were all kinds of varieties. And whoops, I'm going to use a PowerPoint here. And in this flock of birds, there were many varieties, and he began to preach to these birds. And in his preaching to the birds, they came around him more, and he was telling them of the love of God and that he should be praising them. They should be praising God for all of this wonders. But what I began to think in the last several weeks is maybe the birds were preaching to St. Francis. And I began to think, maybe there's a sermon the birds have for us in this particular season of creation and this moment. And then I was thinking of even the scriptures that speak of the birds of the air. They don't toil, and that they have food. They don't have to sow or reap, that food is provided for them. And I found contradictions there. I thought, well, those birds, they work. They search out their seeds. They have to seek out water. And in New Mexico now with the drought, that's even more difficult. So I thought, this is sort of like our world. There are all kinds of contradictions that we have to address, and questions that we continue to have. So in this story of the birds, which I'm going to tell you another story of the birds in just a minute, I think it speaks of this whole sense that we are all one with the Creator. And Laudato Si speaks of that, and Pope Francis. And he says, every creature is an object of the Creator's tenderness, who gives it to its place in this world. And that echoes of Thomas Berry, the Passionist priest, who has as a primary thought in all of his teachings that the world is not a collection of objects, but a communion of subjects. And today we're celebrating the feast of, or the Sunday of Communion, as well as the feast of St. Francis, and we're also celebrating the Jewish feast of the Sukkot. but we are a communion together, every single thing that exists. So really, all of this and this season is about love and relationship, and that love is a liberating love that flows through everything. Now, throughout our Catholic and Christian history and teachings, we have a lot that we have forgotten, I think, that speaks of this. And a lot of it is in the book of nature. Now, we all look to the scripture and think that that is the book, and it is a book. But many of our previous holy mothers and fathers have taught that we need to have the book of nature in order to even understand the book of scriptures. And I like to go to St. Augustine a lot. And he often says that we need that book of nature before the scripture. It is the divine page that you must listen to. It is the book of the universe that you must observe. The pages of scripture can only be read by those who know how to read and write, while everyone, even the illiterate, can read the book of the universe. So I love it that he says the book of the universe. So it's of the stars, the moon, just as St. Francis of Assisi calls everything brother and sister, and the plants and the animals. And then he even has many sermons that are about the book of nature. And he asks, this book is so large and so loud, and it speaks of God so loudly. Can you ask for a louder voice than that? With that question, though, it seems that we have not been hearing that loud voice. So we find ourselves in a time and a moment where we have many challenges with climate change and other issues that I'd like to go through. So going back to our birds, I was given a sermon by the Yellow Warbler a couple of weeks ago. And so I thought, well, Francis had sermons to the birds. Well, I think the birds are speaking to us. So what happened is I heard this desperate sound in our back room, and I saw that it was a yellow warbler. So I went and I got a sheet to try to capture the bird. And as I captured and I was ready to let it go out the door that was open, it flew into the kitchen. Now our kitchen has these large clear story windows on either side. So it kept flying from one window to the other, sometimes banging itself against the window. This went on and on. I got a broom to try to say, perch on the broom and I will take you out, to no avail. I gave some bird seed in a little bowl by the door. That didn't work either. And finally a friend came over. We got a ladder. She climbed on the roof. We opened all the windows, took out the screens, and our little yellow warbler friend flew out. But the sermon the warbler had for me was this. Oftentimes I find myself, and maybe us, like this warbler, banging our heads against one window or the other, thinking this is the way that we need to go, the way to freedom or to new life, or to address all of these challenges that we have. But we realize that we cannot look at life the same way that we have. We cannot do things the way that we have done in the past or that they are patterned. We have to do things in a new way. And so there has to be an openness to grace and to a new window that we can fly out of in order to be of service to the larger world and the common good. So this time, season of creation, the theme this year is one of new rhythms, new hopes, and a jubilee time. And I think that's a wonderful invitation as we face these challenges of climate change and environmental degradation, of racism, of immigration and refugees, economic inequity, of the COVID, and all of these things. So I invited the Yellow Warbler to walk with us through a short presentation today. So this Yellow Warbler is one that lives in New Mexico. And I thought, well, what is this Yellow Warbler seeing as she flies through New Mexico? And just a few of the headlines of the last couple of weeks are the warbler reading this in the skies, the California fires, and the smoke, a record 4 million acres burned in California in 1 year. A cold snap, smoke, drought, and stresses that resulted in over 100,000 migrant birds to be found dead in New Mexico. A drought in New Mexico that makes food and water a challenge for our bird friends, the creatures, but also for human beings. A question Warbler might be saying to us, how do we hold all of this grief? How do we move forward? So regarding the drought, I just thought it's important for us to hold what the Warbler is saying to us in the context of our state and living around the state. And this is the most recent map showing that we are throughout the state, a lot of places, most of the places in severe drought, extreme drought, and exceptional drought. That term exceptional drought was only added a few years ago to these categories by the Weather Service because of climate change and how that is moving us into more extreme patterns. So as Warbler's going about, Warbler is seeing these hard things, that there wasn't enough irrigation water for many of the farmers in the state, that some of the plants, the animals, the fish are dying. But Warbler's also seeing some rays of hope in this season. So here's one of the hopeful things. This is a picture of the school children at St. Joseph in San Fidel, and they were given a New Mexico Interfaith Power and Light Seed Award last year for their creation care work. And one of the things they've done, they've planted gardens. They collected water to have it sampled at Notre Dame University to see if they have toxins from all of the uranium mining that has happened in their place. Some of the students won some awards for making videos, recording the stories of their elders, what happened during the uranium mining, and has that affected their health and the water and the land that they hold sacred. So this is a good news story about how we can be stewards and care for creation. A question, how might your faith community work to care for creation and communities? Another good news story that Warbler saw was children planting trees. These are some Sikh children planting at a fall planting, and a project that was initiated with this called the Forest of Bliss, which is an interfaith project here in Albuquerque to plant up to 1,000 trees in Albuquerque in an interfaith effort. So we're looking for all kinds of interfaith communities to take part in this. A question to DEI is, are any of you interested in participating in this and bringing new life to many homes and our area in Albuquerque? Another wonderful story that Yellow Warbler saw was solar panels on some churches. And one of the places that Yellow Warbler saw this was at the Norbertine Abbey. And Warbler was asking, well, how many other houses of worship have put on solar or done energy efficiency? And Interfaith Power and Light can assist with this. So Warbler also saw some other elements of concern. Looking at our state and flying through methane clouds of pollution in both the northwest and the southeast part of the state. But Warbler also heard echoes that people of faith are speaking out for advocacy in public hearings to get new methane rules in New Mexico, and was also grateful that more than 100 faith leaders have signed letters saying we need these rules to care for our health and to stop wasting God's creation. And then Warbler flew down to southeast New Mexico and saw people of faith here having a prayer service this last year outside Carlsbad, praying for water, and a place where local community members have formed what's called Citizens Caring for the Future to speak with courage as stewards of creation to address pollution of water, land, and air in the oil patch. And with that, there were echoes as they stood behind flares that are sending toxins into the air, echoes of Laudato Si. where Pope Francis has said that our earth, because of how we're treating it, is looking like an immense pile of filth. We need to be caring for it. And addressing a limit to direct technology, and to put at service other types of progress for healthier human life, like maybe renewables and some of that solar. And then Yellow Warbler alerted me that there was a new document that just came out yesterday and today from Pope Francis. And I do have a caveat here. I am grateful for this document, but I also have a challenge to our church, because of the many injustices, one that continues not to be addressed is women. And the title of this document is not inclusive. It is basically in English titled To the Brotherhood. And so some of us who are sisters and women feel excluded in this. And so we need to I'll just say that up front, but even given that, from the brief glimpse that I've gotten through the National Catholic Reporter, this is another document that challenges economic systems and the effect on the environment, on life and our communities, and relationships. It really is one about addressing relationships. But again, with our oil and gas industry here in this state, this document has some challenges regarding the marketplace, and that the marketplace alone cannot resolve every problem. And in this state, we need to address diversification of our economy in order to protect our health and God's creation. And that we can't think that the oil and gas is going to save everyone. And in fact, in the boom bust areas of our state, it's caused ongoing poverty. There is no trickle down. So this document is also very important. But there were another thing that is another area that Yellow Warbler saw. Yellow Warbler saw many of our indigenous brothers and sisters trying to live faithfully on the land and with great challenges, and is asking, can we forge new relationships of trust in this invitation to Jubilee for the earth amidst broken promises? This picture is taken, was part of a faith leader event that I helped organize to Bears Ears, to protect that very sacred place to the Navajo, Hopi, and to many other indigenous peoples in the Southwest, and to protect it from being limited, or some of the land taken away after it was protected in order to do more extractivism. Again, the earth is a cathedral. So we look at these roots of climate change, and we see racist attitudes there, I shouldn't say attitudes, racist structures that are embedded in many ways, as Black Lives Matter have said, through the whole tradition of slavery that we have not let go of, that now we have economic inequities that stem from that. But I'd like to bring up another obsolete worldview that I think is with us and destroying us, and that is the doctrine of discovery. And many people are not aware of this, but it's a papal document, philosophical and a legal framework dating back to the 15th century that justified by the Vatican the ability to go into other lands around the world, and basically said that if those lands were not inhabited by Christians, they could be taken. Now, I bring this up because in some ways, I think this worldview is still in play. And a little example is at a hearing I was at recently regarding trying to put a nuclear waste dump in New Mexico, and we don't even have one single nuclear power plant here, and that's where the waste would come from. One of the speakers said, well, I think New Mexico is a fine place for this, actually Southeast. Nobody lives there. And for me, that speaks of that same worldview. Nobody lives there. Those people aren't important. It speaks of our attitudes with climate change, that, oh, the people living in island nations away from us, well, they shouldn't be living there anyway. They could live someplace else. They're not as important as I am, as we are in this developed country. So I could do a whole long session on the Doctrine of Discovery, but we don't have time for that. So I'm just showing you a few snippets, and I really believe it's something that we need to address. In recent history, a number of indigenous peoples have gone to Rome to speak to the Vatican, to the Pope, to say, please renounce this Doctrine of Discovery. And some are even calling for some kind of reparation. We don't know what that might be. But so far, it has not officially been denounced. Many people in the church say, well, that's old history. That's no longer present. But for those of us here living in or around Albuquerque, we know that it is not gone and past or old history. In fact, we experienced this summer some of the repercussions of this as the statue was tried to be disassembled. And it's not saying what is right or what is wrong, but it's saying we have to grapple with some of these things. And the church is implicated in this. And in this picture of this, this set of statues outside of museum here in Albuquerque, you see the friars, Franciscan friars. And I have to say that I, as a Franciscan, feel some, responsible for this, even though it is in the past. Just another thing to look at. And can this invitation, again, it's a season 2 tear down and a season 2 build up. Can this move us into a deeper authenticity in our relationships and healing for us as Catholic and people of faith in the state? So with that, I'd also like just to say that, as we move into the future and we're invited into this deep evolutionary path, we have to look at all these things in a deeper level. And I just want to make a note, and you can take this down if you choose, of an article written by Ilia Delio. And this is a quote from Lynn White in that. And the article was Co-Creating a New America, Getting Beyond Racism by Remaking Religion. And this is also getting at that papal doctrine of discovery that we need to look at. We need to look at many things if we're going to move beyond racism and address these deep structural changes that our Catholic social teachings invite us to. So Yellow Warbler is back, and Yellow Warbler is not only in New Mexico or in the United States. Yellow Warblers around the world, and seeing lots and lots of refugees and immigrants. And in fact, the UN said that there are 26 million refugees that are, climate refugees right now, with 13 million children from 67 countries. 67% of them are from 5 countries. And I just listed those countries, and I mentioned in particular South Sudan, because it's the worst country being affected now. And not only is it a combination of political unrest, but that's fueled, as we know, in Syria by drought, by people not being able to grow food, to raise food. And so what ensues is a warfare. But in Africa, what they had this year was unprecedented floods and rain as well, which then grew masses of locusts, which then ate crops, and then followed by more droughts. So the UN and others are predicting that by 2050, which is not that far from now, our grandchildren, our nieces, nephews, etc., will be faced with 150 to 200 million human climate refugees. This is not the total of refugees or immigrants. This is climate refugees of people. And then what about the creatures? What is Yellow Warbler saying to us? And then there's a Yellow Warbler in Honduras. I think this speaks to us of that whole area of relationship, that we're all connected all over the globe. So are all the creatures, and we're all in one big family together. And I bring up Honduras because Honduras is in our region of the world, ground zero, along with Salvador and Guatemala in the arid triangle for the effects of climate change, from unprecedented hurricanes, flooding, and then drought, which they have been suffering. So, and with that, there's been a tragic number of migrants seeking poverty and environmental degradation, and we know of that. And added to that, again, are those elements of corporations and the market, which continues to displace people. This picture is one of Berta Cáceres with the Pope, and she was assassinated in Honduras for trying to speak up with her indigenous people from stopping a dam that would have displaced them and disenfranchised their spiritual practices and the earth. So these are things that are all tied in together. And in Central America, we talk about food, and we've been addressing food insecurity here in the United States, especially with COVID, but in Central America, it's been even worse. And I have a friend who is Honduran. She's living here. She has a little boy, and her family still lives in Honduras. And she came here as an undocumented 14-year-old. She's a citizen now and working on her master's degree. But she said people are starving there. It was bad before COVID. It is worse now. And we have, you know, given her some funds even to buy food for some of the families in her family, in her family's village, just staples even. And I think many of you have heard that there's another caravan coming from Honduras to the United States that just left a couple of days ago. It's because people are desperate. The droughts have continued and people look for food. These are just a few sources that speak of some of these challenges of Central American farmers in articles that have appeared in publications. And the slides that I have, I'm very happy to share those with anyone that would like. So we also have a warbler in China called the Chinese leaf warbler, who has hints of yellow. And just to note that this warbler was migrating through the Wuhan territory as we began to have upon us the coronavirus, which we've all been dealing with. And people have been perishing by this as well. And it's been affecting our economy. I think it's also a precursor of other viruses and pandemics that we'll be seeing as we move into climate change. How we deal with this as human beings and brothers and sisters now will lead us into how we deal with these kinds of challenges into the future, because we will have more of these challenges. And again, in the new encyclical, and these quotes were taken from the National Catholic Reporter, Pope Francis is even addressing this, and he said that the COVID influenced greatly how he wrote this encyclical. And so we need to hold all of this as we move forward. And the question is, are we going to become more magnanimous? Are we going to become better people in order to live into the future with these challenges? Because as we saw in some of the earlier slides, there are many good things happening. And the creatures and the community of life is speaking to us. And as I'd like to even put forth to you we're moving towards World Food Day, and New Mexico Interfaith Hunger Coalition has been addressing very faithfully the issue of food, and they're celebrating a number of wonderful stories of New Mexicans that are also addressing this. And so all of these warblers are out there hearing and seeing this and celebrating it and inviting us into those sacred actions. So here is our final warbler, Yellow Rumped Warbler, because I just thought she was so beautiful. And she speaks of Job, but ask the animals. And I think ask the animals, ask the children, ask everyone, and listen with deep contemplative hearts of love for wisdom, for moving into being people of love and caring in this state of New Mexico where we live. So with that, I'd like to just offer you some reflection questions, and you might just jot down one or two of these, and we're going to break into small groups, and we're going to have some sharing around these questions. So when you break into your groups of, it's going to be 4 or 5 people, I invite you to take just a few seconds of silence and look into the eyes of everyone else and make that connection of you being brother and sister relationship, kin, in this beautiful St. Francis Day. And then I would invite you to take whatever of these questions you would like. The first one is, what has spoken to your heart this afternoon? Number 2 is what might have disturbed your heart? 3, in the season of creation, how can I renew my love and wonder for the vast mysteries that surround me? And finally, and very important, what is God inviting me to do as an action that's an expression of my spiritual practice as I hear these cries of the earth and cry of the poor? So you're going to have about 20 minutes for your sharing in your groups, and then you'll be brought back after that.
Hello. So at this point, if you have the ability to unmute yourself, go ahead and unmute yourself. So were there things that, so I think Michelle was not able to use her mic, but maybe she can listen in. I don't know about Pam Fraser. Are you able to unmute yourself? Let's see, maybe I can do it. Let's see if I can. So were there any of those questions that touched you in particular?
Are we in a group now?
We're in a group.
Oh, okay. I couldn't tell. Thank you.
We're in a group.
Well, I love the fact of the warbler.
Oh, I
And,
love that. Was a great theme, wasn't it?
Yes, and then the warbler being so international. I liked that a lot. And what spoke to my heart was, again, or still, you know, the need to pay attention to the hunger that is so prevalent, not just the climate and hunger are, of course, connected. So, yeah, that's the hunger thing grabs at me. I just moved here from Hema Springs, and I was in charge of a food pantry out in Hema Springs. So I'm missing that service work.
I bet you are. I am in a St. Vincent de Paul group, and we had a food distribution every month at our church at St. Therese. And of course, during the pandemic, that's not something we can do. We do contribute then to the big food bank where they do that, you know, huge distribution, but it's not the same as having our, you know, local one and the people that come all the time. Pam, are you able to hear us? Oh, there's Pat. Don't know if Pat can let me unmute her.
Back, I'm on the Joan thing, and we're in a group. I'll call you back.
Okay, somebody is asking for help in one of the other rooms. So I'm going to go to the other room and I'll come back, but feel free to.
Would anybody else like to speak? Louis or Pam? Oh, you're muted. Oh. Oh, I see. Okay. I I'm going to leave and come back in a few minutes.
Hello again.
Okay. There's Joan.
Oops, 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 oops. Ah. I lost folks here.
Yeah, we lost a lot.
I
I
think
know.
we lost in some of the breakout room when we divided into them, like there'd be a room that only had 2 when it should have had 5. So I think when we broke into rooms, some people went away.
Oh.
Because right now it says we only have 14 participants.
Okay. Okay, is everybody back from the great breakout rooms?
Let's see.
Yes.
Yes, okay,
Yes.
great.
Okay.
Oh, we have, yeah, I think Pam,
I
Pam,
know, I'm muted again.
so Pam, I think you're checked in twice. And so because of that, or else you're on the phone and on your computer. So you're down twice. And when that happens, there's an echo. But let's continue on. So I thought we could just have any kind of sharings that people have and any kind of questions. So the screen is open to everybody. So just jump in. And you'll have to remember to unmute yourself if you want to speak.
Sister Joan, in our little breakout group, one of the last things we discussed is what kinds of things can we do? I think it was the question 4. And I was wondering if you would like to comment on that. How can we as individuals do something?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so, you know, I gave a few little hints in the PowerPoint as we went along, but let me just recap a few things. So we can do a number of things individually, like what we eat, for instance. Do we eat food that's local? Do we, you know, eat less meat? Those are all things that help the planet and address, you know, climate change. How much do I drive? But I think what we need is also larger efforts that are collective and communal. And I think that's what Pope Francis is also calling us into, is communal and relational relationship. And that's what's transformative and can transform structures. So public policy advocacy. Do I read? Am I up to date? Do I make calls to my congresspeople? Do I engage with some group that is addressing some of these changes that have to happen, like with the methane regulations, for instance, here in this state? You know, does my faith community, my parish, have they done an energy efficiency audit? Have they put on solar? Do they do local food? Those are bigger collective things. And then there's the policy advocacy things. You know, this with Interfaith Power and Light, this Forest of Bliss project to plant trees, I think is a wonderful, fun project that anybody can be involved in, whether it's donations to the Sikh community to buy trees, or whether it's planting a new tree in my backyard, or whether it's going out with some other folks at a safe distance to plant some trees. You know, I think trying to learn about and address the doctrine of discovery. We have to change our worldview, how we're viewing things, and those things that have a hold on us, that keep us in these same structures, racist structures, or structures where we don't honor and recognize one another, or the creation. So, I mean, there's many number of things. I hope that helps a little bit. There's many more things as well.
You.
I want to thank you, Joan, for going over that document of discovery. I did not realize that it's never been mitigated or rescinded, and I do think that's something we could do as Catholics, and that is to make that known to our bishops and our Pope that we want that that document to be rescinded. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. You know, Janelle, just so you know, and I'm sure your community signed on as well. In 2012, a lot of Catholic women's communities signed on to a letter that was taken to the Vatican requesting that, and it did not happen. While the Pope and the Vatican have made some statements saying, well, you know, we're sorry this happened. It's never been officially rescinded. At this point, it does hold legal stance as well. I can't remember, but it was used as recently as can't remember if it was 2010 or 2012 or something in a legal case actually back east. And it was the basis for winning for this legal case. And our Indigenous brothers and sisters, many of them, and some of them quite young, keep going to the Vatican to ask that this might happen. I think it's of interest to note that when the Pope went to Colombia, he wanted to meet with a very secluded Indigenous group of people, the Kogi peoples, and they sent word to the invitation to the Vatican. They said, we will do this, we will meet with him if you rescind the Doctrine of Discovery. And they said no, and they said, we will not meet with you, and they did not. But with that then, and with the whole racism issue that we're addressing, there's a big question of what does reparation look like? So with our Indigenous brothers and sisters in the church, there's also that, and that may not be any material reparation. It might be some other kind of reparation, spiritual, or honoring who they are, or it might be, you know, who knows what. I mean, I can't speak for them, but I do believe this moment in history is a moment we have to address with this, and it's underlying in the challenge, the event we had in Albuquerque here, and trying to take down the Oñate statue. And added to that, there is great, what shall I say, affront to our Indigenous brothers and sisters at the canonization of Junipero Serra. I've spoken in different places, and if there are Indigenous people there, right after that happened, I was confronted and said, why did you do that? What? I can't listen to anything you're saying. It's all discredited because of what you just did. So I, of course, have to say, well, I am really, really sorry, and I don't agree with that, etc. But these things keep happening, and they are translated into other elements like our policies and other things. So Janelle, I believe truly we as Catholics have to grapple with this in this state.
Han just mentioned soil restoration.
Yes.
An interesting suggestion. Yeah.
Yes, and actually, you might be pleased to know that in New Mexico and Interfaith Power and Light here, we worked on this. There was a bill in the legislature 2019 that dealt with soil restoration. And Healthy Soils Act is what it was called. And so that is giving some grants to small producers, and also some more investigation in our universities here in the state, and trying to put that forward. So soil restoration is very, very important, and a growing kind of edge that we need to look at, because for water conservation, but also growing food. And not just here in our state or our country, but supporting that in other countries. When we talk about, for instance, some of us are quite concerned about immigrants and refugees. When we talk about that in any future, hopefully, reform in immigration, I always say one of the things that has to be part of it for our brothers and sisters, especially, you know, in our hemisphere with folks from Central America coming here, is adaptation, money for adaptation mitigation with climate change and those farmers. So we need to really, as Pope Francis talks about integral ecology, we need to connect the dots, make these connections, and even with our legislation, advocacy in all kinds of ways. So yes. A question here, do you propose that as a means of reparation?
That was really for Han, because he said, what about soil reparation? I was saying, is that what was he suggesting that would be a means of reparations towards the Native peoples? And
You know, something like that or saving native seeds might be, but I think that has to come from the people themselves.
Right.
Again, impose anything. We need to listen, and we need to then be in conversation. But we can't even move to that reparation until we say that, yes, we need to renege or say, yes, we take this back. This is unacceptable, the doctrine of discovery at this point. Other questions, comments, things that you feel that you'd like to do or maybe do, things that disturbed you that you're going to reflect on more?
One of the things that I appreciate you're talking about is the nature as the first cathedral, because I think many of us are missing being in church and you know, greeting our friends there and being a part of service. But I think, but what I've been trying to do on Sunday is go for a long walk and really appreciate, you know, the trees, especially, although some of them are just, it breaks my heart that we haven't had rain and the trees are looking so bad, but still there are some that still look nice and are doing okay. But just to be a part of nature, I think for me has been a boon in this, you know, at this particular time. So I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to say, in terms of your theme of the warbler and the birds, you know, it's just been so fitting, because one of the things that I noticed earlier on in the pandemic is how much more attuned to, I don't know if I heard them more, or there were more birds singing, or I was just not bustling around so much. So I was opening my sliding door so I could hear the birds in the morning. And then you know, a few weeks ago when we saw all those photos and the stories came out about all the birds, and thinking there they were singing for us, and then they're dying. And is that an individual more I know it's not totally isolated, but you know, what all was affecting that? And because I thought maybe the pandemic was kind of helping their situation some, and then it turns out, you know, there they all are at risk, and how sad.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that this time of the pandemic has opened their senses and to beauty and to the natural world. And that is a part of prayer and meditation and contemplation more. And I think that is a grace, and that's a teaching for us. And that's why I was listening to Yellow Warbler also, and even though our traveling around so much and all has helped the environment a little bit, that we're out of control with climate change at this point, and all the repercussions of that. And it seems that they're still not quite clear why we had those more than 100,000 dead birds here in New Mexico, but it seems directly related to like the fires, or to the dramatic fluctuation in the temperatures, or the drought. The birds were stressed, they didn't have enough energy. I mean, any number or all of the confluence of those things.
I was struck, sister, by that whole image of the world not being a collection of objects, but a communion of subjects. And, you know, the tenderness of the Creator holding up everything in reverence and joy that He's created. And what we were talking about a little bit in our group is the sadness is we've lost a parallel communion with each other, even as human beings. What we used to be known for is that we looked out for each other. It was a natural instinct.
Yeah.
We were together. Sure, we had our differences, our ideological positions, but now we've become so ideological in the way we approach anything that we don't even think we have any responsibility to each other. We've distorted and perverted the meaning of freedom. And for an advanced civilization that we're supposed to be. We're regressing. We have no sense of that I have any responsibility for anyone but myself. And it's killing the planet, and it's killing the soul of humanity.
No, I agree. I don't have a response other than great sadness that we're in this place. And then just I myself reflect so that I don't go into too dark of a hole, thinking, well, this is calling us to a deeper love. I think of Thich Nhat Hanh. This is a story that I just hold. And Thich Nhat Hanh is a Buddhist monk. And after the first time the U.S. went into started the Iraq War, he was so angry and so upset, he said, that he spent all night in walking meditation. And what he came to is that we are in this place because I was not attentive enough to my own spiritual practice and putting that in action in the world. And so I always hold that kind of reflection that he had, because it's us, it's me individually and us collectively. And this is our work, a spiritual work and the work of social justice and loving the world very, very directly. And so following through what am I called to do and having courageous voices to speak out. I'm also reminded of the folks we're working with in the Permian Basin, who are a number of faith leaders and people of faith and community who started this group, Citizens Caring for the Future. Now, we all know that the southeast part of the state is really very conservative, and it's oil and gas area, but there's all kinds of health problems, pollution of air, water, land. Nobody speaking out about it down there. These folks said, yes, we will begin to do this. We'll meet together, we will speak out. And it takes a lot of courage to do that in that kind of a place. And they've been doing it at regulatory meetings, talking to media, talking to their local civic leaders, et cetera. So it's each of us being very faithful to our spiritual practice, our prayers, our meditation, and then acting in community to what we're called to. And I believe nothing is ever lost, and transformation will happen and is happening. But it's very difficult, and it's very, very sad. It saddens my heart, exactly what you were saying. Okay. Are there any other thoughts that we have or things people would like to share today? Well, if not, I have a closing prayer I'd like to just invite us into. And I also know Marie said that she was taping this, so it'll be available to others to share as well. And again, I just want to thank you for this invitation and for being with you today. It was just a joy, so thank you. So for our closing prayer, I would like to just pray the Canticle of Creation from St. Francis of Assisi. But one thing I'm not sure everybody realizes, this is a beautiful canticle, a beautiful prayer, and it calls us, and in his time, it's looked at as revolutionary because it was calling people to this other sense of a larger relationship and familial or kinship with everything that exists. But the other thing I think people are not aware of, Francis wrote this, or he composed it, I should say, and then he dictated it to his brothers, not too long before he died. And at the time he was blind, he was physically suffering immensely. And actually he had prayed to God and said, if it's my time, take me. I just don't know what else. I can't deal with this anymore. Just take me. But instead he woke up and this canticle was on his heart. He shared it. And then a couple of the latter stanzas of it about death, he wrote a little bit, were added a little bit later. But I think it's a huge lesson for us at this moment, because we are in this very dark time. We feel like, well, what hope is there? People our friends and family are dying. I just had a dear friend, her husband just died of COVID just a couple days ago. And then we have the political situation and the chaos there, and all the immigrants and the fires and all of this. But in the midst of this, Francis in this canticle shares with us that there is immense beauty, that love permeates everything, that we're related to everyone. And with this presence of the holy within us, amidst us, and around us, all kinds of things are possible, and there is great beauty. So that's the message I'd just like to leave you with. And I'll just pray this canticle for us, and then we can maybe go for another walk outside in this beauty of the day. Most high, all powerful, all good God, all praise is yours, all glory, all honor, and all blessings. To you alone, Most High, do they belong, and no mortal lips are worthy to pronounce your name. Praise be you, my God, with all your creatures, especially Sir Brother's Son, who is the day through whom you give us light, and he is beautiful and radiant and with great splendor. Of you, Most High, he bears the likeness. Praise be to you, my God, through our sister moon and the stars. In the heavens you have made them bright, precious, and fair. Praise be you to my God through brothers, wind and air, and fair and stormy, and all weather's moods, by which you cherish all that you have made. And praise be to you, my God, through sister water, so useful, humble, precious, and pure. Praise be you, my God, through brother fire, through whom you light the night, and he is so beautiful and playful and robust and strong. Praise be you, my God, through our sister Mother Earth, who sustains and governs us, producing varied fruits with colored flowers and herbs. Praise be you, my God, through those who grant pardon of your love and bear sickness and trial. Blessed are those who endure in peace. By you, Most High, they will be crowned. Praise be you, my God, through Sister Death, from whom no one living can escape. And woe to those who die in mortal sin. Blessed are they she finds doing your will. No second death can do them harm. Praise and bless, my Lord, and give thanks and serve God with great humility. Amen, amen. Peace and good. Pace bene.
Amen, amen.
Thank you. Amen.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Amen.
Sister
Blessings.
Joan, and everyone who
Blessings.
came.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Joan.